The wind swept in from the ocean, cold and biting, rattling the window panes of the old Victorian house on Eaton Street. The palm trees outside swayed violently, their shadows dancing like ghostly figures against the walls. Inside, the air was thick with humidity and an almost palpable tension. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with every gust of wind, as if the house itself were alive, listening, waiting. In the dim light of the attic, where dust motes floated lazily through a single narrow beam of sunlight, sat a doll. Robert, they called him. He sat propped up on a small wooden chair, his beady black eyes fixed on the door, his smile wide and unchanging, his sailor suit impeccably clean despite the years of neglect. His presence was heavy, a weight that pressed down on the room, filling it with a strange, suffocating silence. Robert had been there for as long as anyone could remember. A gift, they said, from a disgruntled servant with knowledge of dark arts, a spiteful gesture toward a wealthy family that had once owned the grand house. Eugene Otto, the boy who had received Robert, had adored him. More than a toy, more than a friend, Robert was his confidant, his protector. He whispered secrets into Robert's ears, laughed with him in the dead of night, and carried him everywhere, always by his side. But then, things began to change. The whispers started. At first, it was just little things. Objects moved when no one was looking. Faint giggles echoed through the halls. A shadow that didn't belong flitted past the edges of vision. The housemaids muttered among themselves, crossing themselves when they walked past the boy's room. Eugene's parents, wealthy and well-respected in Key West, dismissed the servants' gossip as mere superstition, their old-world fears brought to the new world. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The boy's laughter, once so innocent, became tinged with a strange, unsettling edge, as if he were sharing some private joke with Robert that no one else could understand. And sometimes late at night, Eugene's mother would wake to the sound of small, shuffling footsteps in the hallway outside their bedroom. She would open the door, heart hammering, and find nothing but darkness and the faint echo of giggles receding down the corridor. One night, as a storm raged outside, the family awoke to a loud crash. Rushing to Eugene's room, they found it in disarray. Furniture was overturned, the bedclothes torn and scattered across the floor. Eugene sat in the center of it all, clutching Robert tightly to his chest, his eyes wide, his lips trembling. "Robert did it," he whispered, his voice a trembling whisper in the howling wind. "He's angry. He didn't like what I said. He didn't like it at all." Eugene's father, a stern man, scoffed at the absurdity of his son's claims. He snatched the doll from Eugene's arms, intending to throw it away, but as his fingers closed around Robert's cloth body, a sharp pain shot up his arm. He recoiled, his hand numb, his fingers twitching involuntarily. He looked down at the doll's face, and for a moment, just a moment, he could have sworn the painted smile twisted into a sneer. They locked Robert in the attic that night, turning the key in the old rusted lock with a sense of finality. The doll sat there, motionless in the darkness, and the family tried to forget. But Robert did not like to be forgotten. The house began to change. The floorboards creaked with footsteps that were not there, lights flickered without reason, and the whispers grew louder. Eugene's parents argued more, their voices rising above the strange sounds that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. And Eugene? Eugene became withdrawn, pale, his eyes darting toward the ceiling as if he could hear something the others couldn't. "I hear him," he would say softly to anyone who would listen. "He talks to me through the walls. He's angry because we locked him away. He wants out. He wants to play." The servants began to quit, one by one, claiming they couldn't bear the sounds in the night, the cold spots that seemed to follow them, the feeling of being watched. The locals in Key West avoided the house, crossing the street to avoid walking past it, muttering prayers under their breath. The family, desperate and on the verge of collapse, consulted a priest who came to bless the house. But as he entered the attic, the air grew thick, heavy, almost suffocating. The doll sat there in his chair, his eyes seeming to follow the priest's every move. The priest did not stay long. His face pale, his hands trembling, he whispered a quick prayer and fled, refusing to return. Years passed. Eugene grew, but he never parted with Robert. Even as an adult, he kept the doll in his house, in a room of his own, always watching, always waiting. When Eugene died, his wife, exhausted from years of whispers of strange happenings, donated the doll to a museum in Key West, hoping to be rid of it once and for all. But Robert had other plans. At the museum, he was given a glass case, a display meant to contain him. Tourists came, snapping pictures, laughing at the silly, creepy old doll. But some did not laugh for long. Cameras malfunctioned, phones froze, and more than a few visitors claimed they heard him whisper, a low, soft voice, speaking in a language no one could understand. Those who mocked him would leave, only to find themselves plagued by misfortune, accidents, and strange, inexplicable occurrences. Letters began to arrive at the museum, hundreds of them. Apologies from those who had dared to insult Robert, asking for forgiveness, begging for the curse to be lifted. Some came in person, tears streaming down their faces, pleading with the museum staff to let them speak to the doll, to ask for his mercy. And there, in his glass case, Robert sits. His eyes, dark and beady, seem to follow every movement, every breath. His smile, stitched and painted, remains unchanged. Yet, those who dare to look closer swear that sometimes, when the light hits just right, that smile seems to widen, just a little, as if he knows something they don't, as if he's waiting, ever so patiently, for someone to let him out. Because Robert is never done playing, and he is always listening.